The terrifying truth about Route 666, cursed highway and the man in black. True scary story. Have you ever driven down a road so eerie, so unsettling, that you felt something watching you, something otherworldly? A stretch of highway so cursed that it bends the very laws of nature? This isn't just a road. This is Route 666, and once you enter, there's no going back. Tonight, I'm going to share with you the terrifying experience of a trucker who, lured by the promise of double pay, made the fatal decision to drive down this dark and treacherous path. What awaited him wasn't just a haunted highway, but something far worse, an ancient evil that plays tricks with your mind, twists reality, and pulls you into a nightmare from which there's no escape. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a warning. The sky was an oppressive, ink-black canvas as I rounded the curve, the headlights of my 18-wheeler barely cutting through the relentless downpour. It was 3:17 a.m. when I first saw the sign. There wasn't much to see. The rain and fog swallowed up the horizon, the road bending sharply ahead as if it led to nowhere. My truck's engine growled beneath me, steady and familiar, but the deeper I drove into the night, the more uneasy I became. This stretch of road, known as Route 666, was no stranger to legends. Locals gave it a name that echoed across generations. The name had weight. They called it Route 666 for a reason. Some said it was cursed. Others claimed it was simply a stretch of highway that invited the worst kind of attention, a place where anything could happen, and usually did. The kind of place where reality itself felt thin, like an old, tattered sheet draped over a monstrous, unseen force. I had heard the stories before, of course. Everyone in the trucking business had. The disappearances of drivers, the vehicles found empty with no sign of their owners, the stories about hitchhikers who didn't look quite human, and the strange, shadowy figures seen moving between the trees at night. I had always dismissed them as superstition. Old folklore designed to keep newbies like me away from the road. No one with a lick of sense took those stories seriously. But tonight was different. There was no room for superstition when desperation clawed at your chest. My daughter, Ellie, was sick in ways I couldn't even begin to explain, with medical bills that piled up faster than the leaves fell in autumn. Desperate times. That's why I had taken the job. Double pay for driving this stretch of Route 666 every night. It was too much money to turn down, even if the whispers about the route were true. At the dispatch office, Hank was quiet. He handed me a sealed envelope, his weathered hands trembling ever so slightly as he passed it to me. His eyes avoided mine, the kind of look that made my skin crawl. The envelope was old, its edges worn, as though it had been handled too many times by too many different people. "Read the rules," Hank muttered, his voice gruff but low, "and follow them to the letter. Don't ask questions. Just do as they say." He didn't need to say more. I nodded and took the envelope from him. I didn't ask why. I didn't question the rules. Desperation had a way of drowning out logic, and the money I was about to earn was more than I'd seen in years. But even as I got into my truck and pulled away, something about Hank's face lingered in my mind. There was something dark there, something unspoken. His eyes seemed to hide a truth, a warning. But I pushed it away. What did I care? I was a trucker, a seasoned driver. I could handle anything. As I hit the highway and headed toward Route 666, my gut twisted with unease. The rain lashed harder and the storm seemed to envelope me, its heaviness pulling at the air. My fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel. And then the sign appeared. Route 666. I could barely make out the weathered letters, their paint peeling in the relentless downpour. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the forest pressing in on either side, black and formless. It was as though the road had no end. It was a place that felt too still, too silent. I reached for the envelope, the one Hank had handed me, and ripped it open. Inside, I found a piece of yellowed paper. The handwriting was uneven, as though it had been written by several different hands over the years. Each line seemed to tremble with the weight of something ancient, something that had been passed down through countless others who had driven this cursed road. Rule number 1, do not stop for hitchhikers. Not even if they appear to be law enforcement, children, or family. Rule number 2, If the temperature inside your cab drops suddenly, recite your full name 3 times. Rule number 3, if you see a man in black standing on the side of the road, do not stop. Keep driving. He is not a man. I paused, reading the words again, feeling the chill creep down my spine. Do not stop. The rules were simple enough, but something in the air seemed to grow heavier as I read on. My fingers shook as I held the paper. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't some roadside tradition. These rules were more than strange, they were life or death instructions. The last rule stood out to me, the man in black. I had heard of him. Truckers whispered about him in hushed tones, like some kind of shadow that walked this very road. But I had always assumed it was just part of the legend. Something to keep drivers from getting too comfortable, too careless. But this was different. The rules were specific. These rules were about survival. I tossed the list aside and tried to focus. There was no sense in worrying about superstition. It was just a job. Just another road. But as I drove further into the night, my mind wouldn't let go of the rules. What if? What if I broke one? What if I saw something I wasn't supposed to? What if I ignored the warning? What then? And then I saw him. The man in black. It wasn't the first time I'd seen something strange on the road. But this was different. He stood just off to the side of the highway, almost completely hidden by the trees. His figure was impossibly tall, his face obscured beneath the brim of a wide, black hat. He didn't move as I approached. He didn't even acknowledge me. But I felt him. I felt his gaze. My heart raced as I passed, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. My eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. He was still there, watching. Still there, like a shadow frozen in place, standing silently by the side of the road. The rules. Do not stop for the man in black. The cold that gripped the cab made my breath fog up in the air. The temperature had dropped abruptly, a sudden chill running through the truck, biting into my skin. Rule number 2. I swallowed hard, trying to focus. I had to do it. It didn't matter if it felt silly. I needed to follow the rules. I forced myself to say it. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. The cold passed almost immediately, leaving me shaking. But the road was still dark ahead. The figure was gone. What was this place? The question lingered in my mind, unanswered. I was driving into something I couldn't yet understand. Something older than the road, older than the rules themselves. The darkness of Route 666 had started to seep into my bones. I felt it in the rain, in the way the road seemed to stretch too long. I could feel the weight of the stories around me, the ones I had dismissed as nonsense. They weren't stories. They were warnings. I glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. I kept driving, but the unease that gripped me now was something different. It wasn't just fear. It was the feeling that I had already made a mistake I wouldn't be able to undo. The worst part? The worst part was that I knew, deep down, I wasn't going to be able to leave this road. Not now. Not ever. The road, the rules, this was just the beginning. The rain was coming down harder now, thick sheets of water slamming into the windshield, distorting my view. The headlights of the truck barely pierced the dense fog wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The road ahead was a ghostly ribbon, twisting through the dark abyss of the Appalachian forest. I could barely make out the outlines of the trees on either side, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands reaching out to pull me into the darkness. The truck's tires hissed over the wet asphalt. A constant, rhythmic noise that was somehow comforting in the growing unease gnawing at the edges of my mind. I focused all my attention on the road, forcing my thoughts to stay locked on the task at hand. It was what I had done for years. Keep driving, keep moving forward, no matter what distractions tried to break through. But tonight, the road felt different. The silence around me wasn't the usual peace of an empty highway. It was the silence before something terrible, the kind of stillness that fills the air with tension, like the world holding its breath. As the miles ticked by, the strange sensation that I was being watched grew stronger, more insistent. It wasn't the normal feeling of being alone in the dark, where the mind plays tricks. No, this was something primal, instinctive, a cold, creeping sensation that slithered up my spine. Every flicker of movement in the trees sent my heart racing. Every rustling of the leaves felt like it was some unseen creature inching closer. But it wasn't just fear, it was the deep, bone-chilling certainty that I wasn't alone on this road. Something was watching me. Something out there in the shadows. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer driving through a highway. I was driving through a place, a different kind of place, where rules didn't apply and the normal laws of nature didn't hold. The world around me was becoming wrong. But what was wrong? I didn't know, but I could feel it down to my bones. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 3:45 a.m. That's when I saw him. The figure stood by the side of the road, barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. A man, no, not a man, not fully. Tall and thin, his silhouette impossibly straight against the backdrop of the trees, dressed in a black suit and wide-brimmed hat. His face was obscured by shadows, the brim of his hat hanging low. He didn't move as I drove closer. He was standing completely still, as though waiting for something. As though waiting for me? The rules, buried deep in the back of my mind, screamed at me, a voice I couldn't ignore. Do not stop. The cold, logical part of me that still clung to reason told me not to engage, to keep driving, to keep my eyes on the road. But the unease gnawed at me, something about this wasn't right. I pushed my foot down on the accelerator, my hands tight on the wheel, and the truck lurched forward. My eyes were fixed straight ahead, but I could feel the man's presence, like a weight pressing against the sides of my brain. He was still there, standing motionless, like some terrible monument to the road I was on. I tried to shake the image from my mind. He was just a figure. Nothing more than a trick of the night, my mind playing with me. It had to be. But the longer I drove, the harder it became to convince myself of that. The truck's engine hummed, its rhythmic sound like a heartbeat syncing with my own. My skin tingled, but it wasn't the usual sweat of a long drive. This was something different. It was a chill, creeping across my skin like the very air had turned colder. At first, it was subtle, just a faint shiver, a drop in temperature that I barely registered. But soon, the chill became unbearable. The warmth inside the cab, which I had relied on to stave off the cold rain outside, began to fade. The heat in the truck sputtered, useless. I glanced at the thermometer. It read 50 degrees. That wasn't possible. The air in the cab was too cold, unnaturally cold, like something had reached in through the very walls of the truck and frozen the air. This wasn't a malfunction of the HVAC system. This was something wrong. Something far beyond the usual glitches I'd seen on long-haul trips. I swallowed hard. The knot in my stomach tightened. Follow the rules. I couldn't stop myself from remembering what Hank had warned me. The rules. The damn rules. And I had to follow them. I had no choice. The words echoed in my head like a mantra. Rule number 2. If the temperature inside your cab drops suddenly, recite your full name 3 times. I had no idea why this was a rule. No idea why it would matter. But I knew that, in this place, these rules weren't just suggestions, they were survival. They were the only things standing between me and whatever waited out there on the road. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to focus, trying to push through the rising panic. I recited my full name aloud, forcing each word through my shaking lips, even as my breath fogged up in the air. Daniel James Mercer. The chill didn't go away at first. It lingered like a fog inside the cab, thick and suffocating, making the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. I repeated the name, each time my voice shaking a little more, my breath coming faster as the temperature dropped even lower. The air felt like it was made of ice. And then, like some invisible force had been lifted, the temperature in the cab started to ease. The frost that had gathered on the windows began to dissipate, and the heat slowly returned. The harsh, unnatural cold was gone, but the dread remained. It wasn't just the cold that unsettled me now. It was the feeling that something wasn't right. Something in the air felt wrong. The road ahead, the truck, Everything about this place seemed to be twisted. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man in black still standing there, waiting for me. But the road behind me was empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I pushed on, the miles ticking away, but the presence of that figure, of that thing, lingered like a shadow in the corners of my mind. I was no longer just a driver passing through a strange stretch of highway. I was being tested, and I was starting to realize that the rules were no longer just precautions. They were the only thing that could keep me from becoming part of this cursed road forever. The road stretched on endlessly, a dark, wet ribbon that seemed to twist and writhe under the weight of the night. The fog had thickened, creeping in like a living thing, coiling around the truck and swallowing everything beyond the reach of my headlights. The trees on either side of the road, once just outlines in the darkness, now leaned in closer, taller, more threatening, as if the forest itself were pressing against the vehicle, suffocating the air with its dense presence. I kept driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I tried to focus, tried to keep my mind on the rules I had reluctantly memorized. Don't stop. Don't look at him. Nod, but don't acknowledge the man in black. The rules were starting to make more sense now, in ways I wasn't quite ready to admit. I hadn't believed in them before, not truly. But now every flicker of movement, every strange sound, every chilling gust of wind reminded me of their importance. The man in black, the creature that haunted this road, was more than just a figure. He was a warning, a symbol of something darker, something older than the asphalt beneath my tires. I thought back to Hank's face when he gave me the envelope, the way his eyes had darted nervously as he spoke those words, "Follow the rules or you won't make it out of here." He had known. He knew exactly what awaited me on this road. And now I was learning the hard way. And then there he was again. The man in black. My breath caught in my throat. I had hoped, prayed that I had passed him. But no, he was still out there. His figure stood just off to the side of the road, cloaked in darkness, his tall frame a stark contrast against the faint glow of the headlights. He was as still as a statue, his eyes hidden beneath the wide brim of his black hat. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his presence, heavy and unyielding. His gaze seemed to press into me like a weight, suffocating and cold. It was as though he could see through me, like he knew everything about me, every secret, every fear, every weakness. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 3:59 a.m. The time seemed to freeze, like the numbers were mocking me, teasing me with their impossible precision. It wasn't just the hour that felt off, it was the air itself. It felt thick, charged, like the world was holding its breath. And then the sound came. A sharp, horrific screech, metal dragging against metal, a noise so jarring it sliced through the silence like a knife. It was like nails on a chalkboard, but worse, far worse. My heart lurched in my chest as the noise echoed above the truck, coming from the roof as if something or someone was scraping against the metal with claws. I slammed my foot down on the gas, my heart pounding as my foot pressed harder against the pedal, pushing the truck to its limit. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel, my vision narrowing to the road ahead, but that noise, it wouldn't stop. It was relentless, gnawing at my sanity. The creature, whatever it was on the roof, didn't stop. It continued scraping, dragging its claws across the top of my cab with a sound that made my stomach churn. It was like the truck was being torn apart, like something with an appetite for destruction was toying with me. The noise was deafening, pressing in on me from all sides until it felt like the walls of the truck were closing in. I couldn't take it anymore. My foot slammed harder on the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest. The truck surged forward, the trees flashing past in a blur of shadow and rain. I glanced at the side mirror, and there he was again. The man in black. This time he was closer than ever. But this time there was something else. Something behind him, something monstrous, a shadow that moved with unnatural speed, too large and too fluid to be human. It wasn't just behind him, it was merging with him, becoming a part of him, a dark, shapeless mass that seemed to grow larger and more solid as I drove. It moved like it was alive, like it was hunting, chasing me down. But even though it was growing, it never seemed to get closer. It was always there, just out of reach, like a shadow that couldn't quite be caught. I couldn't look at it, but I couldn't look away either. The rules, again, do not look directly at him. Do not ignore him. Nod in greeting and keep going. I forced my eyes forward, not daring to glance at the mirror for too long. The man in black, he had become more than just a figure. He had become the road itself, a part of the nightmare that lived here, something I couldn't escape from. I nodded once as I passed him, just as the rules had dictated. My throat was dry, my chest tightening with each second. I could feel my heart pounding, my pulse thundering in my ears. The truck's engine rumbled beneath me, but it was drowned out by the sound of the scraping, the claws that seemed to grow louder, closer. The air around me grew colder, and the presence of the thing behind me felt heavier. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror again, but I could feel it pressing in on me from the darkness. That thing, whatever it was following me. I glanced at the rearview mirror, desperate to see something, anything normal. But there was nothing. The road was empty behind me, just as it should be. Yet, the scraping sound remained. It lingered, echoing in my ears, as if the creature were still up there, still on my truck, scraping its claws against the metal. The noise hadn't stopped. It hadn't ceased. I could still feel it, still hear it. A part of me wanted to stop, wanted to pull over and get out, to look and see what was really there, what was chasing me, what was tormenting me. But the rules screamed at me to keep going. Don't stop. So I didn't. But something deep inside me knew. I had seen the man in black again. And this time it was different. I wasn't just driving anymore. I was being chased. It wasn't until I reached mile marker 37 that I began to truly understand. Up until then, I had thought the rules were simply precautions. Strange, cryptic instructions passed down from driver to protect them from the supernatural forces haunting Route 666. But now, as the mile marker loomed closer in my headlights, I realized the truth. The rules weren't just there to protect me from the things I could see. They were there to keep me from losing my mind. Because this road didn't just play with what was in front of you. It played with what was inside you. Your fears, your regrets, the things that haunted your past. And it used them. It was clear now that the road itself wasn't just a path between two places. It was something far more insidious. It was a maze, a trap built to break you down, to twist your perception of reality until you couldn't tell what was real anymore. I glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. As I drove past mile marker 37, I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, a cold wave that washed over me, tightening my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, like something was pressing in from all sides. My eyes darted to the side, half expecting to see a figure in black standing in the trees, waiting. But there was nothing, just the thick fog, the oppressive silence, the ever-encroaching darkness. I wasn't alone on the road anymore. It started with a whisper. At first, it was so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A soft voice, distant but familiar, barely above the hum of the engine and the patter of rain on the windshield. It was almost like a memory, a sound from a dream. But then it grew louder, clearer. And as it grew louder, it grew more insistent. "Daddy, why won't you answer me?" It was Ellie's voice. My heart dropped into my stomach. Ellie, my daughter, wasn't supposed to be here. She was thousands of miles away, at home with her mother. Safe. It was impossible. The chill that had crept into the cab deepened, and I could feel it spreading through my veins, freezing me to the core. I slammed my hand against the radio, hoping to silence the voice, hoping it was just a malfunction or a weird static glitch. But the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, more desperate, more urgent. "Daddy, I'm scared," Ellie's voice pleaded, sending a shiver up my spine. "Daddy, the man in black is here. He's here. Help me." I froze. My grip on the wheel tightened. The road ahead was a blur, but all I could hear was her voice calling out to me from nowhere. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I grabbed the radio, desperate to turn it off, but the buttons wouldn't work. My heart pounded in my chest as the static crackled and Ellie's voice continued, as clear and chilling as ever. "Daddy, please. I'm scared. The man in black is here. He's going to take me. No. No. This isn't happening. I slammed my hand against the dashboard, hoping to break the trance, but the voice only got louder. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was everywhere. The sound echoed in my head, filling every corner of the cab, drowning out everything else. I wanted to scream, to shut it all off, but I couldn't. I was trapped in the sound of my daughter's voice, in this nightmare where nothing made sense. The road is playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. It was the road, the cursed place I was on. It knew my weakness, my love for my daughter, and it was using it against me. Trying to break me. Ellie isn't here, I whispered to myself, though it felt hollow, like a lie I was trying to convince myself to believe. But the voice didn't stop. It never stopped. Daddy, please. I'm scared. The man in black, he's going to shut up. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing the truck faster, desperate to escape the voice, to outrun whatever it was that was messing with my head. I needed to get away. I couldn't let it consume me. I couldn't. But as I pushed the pedal down harder, the road seemed to stretch endlessly before me. The fog thickened, pressing in on the truck like it was alive, pushing against the tires as if trying to drag me back. And still, Ellie's voice echoed, louder now, like it was coming from inside my skull. Daddy, why won't you answer me? I'm scared. I glanced at the rearview mirror, hoping, praying that I could find something in the reflection to break the illusion. But all I saw was the dark expanse of the road behind me. No cars. No sign of the man in black. Nothing. Just the stretch of road leading nowhere. It wasn't real. It can't be real. But that didn't stop the dread from seeping deeper into my bones. I pressed on, my foot relentless on the gas, the engine roaring in protest. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, if I slowed down, if I listened to the voice, it would swallow me whole. The road was doing this to me, twisting my mind, trying to break me, piece by piece. Daddy, her voice, soft now fragile. So close. I glanced at the side mirror. Nothing. But the hairs on my neck stood up again. The presence was there, lingering, watching. Waiting. The rules. They told me to drive on. To not stop. To not let anything distract me. But this was different. This wasn't just some phantom on the side of the road. This was something that knew me. Knew my fears. It was playing with my mind, drawing me in with a voice I couldn't ignore. It was as if the road had become an extension of my own thoughts, pulling me into a deep, suffocating madness. I was trapped. There was no escape. The more I tried to shake the voice off, the more it stuck to me, like a thick fog that couldn't be cleared. Every turn I made, every mile I covered, the voice followed, getting louder, closer, until I was drowning in it. Ellie's voice. My daughter's voice. The rules were supposed to protect me. But now, they felt like chains that bound me to this road, to this nightmare. I couldn't get out. I couldn't go back. The man in black wasn't the only thing I had to worry about anymore. I was already lost. By the time I hit mile marker 40, I realized I had crossed a line I could never come back from. The road wasn't just a road anymore. It wasn't a stretch of asphalt connecting one place to another. No, it had become something far more insidious. It had become a living entity, a creature with its own pulse, its own hunger. And I was its prey. I had heard the stories. The warnings passed down from one driver to the next, whispered in hushed tones, shared in truck stops between sips of stale coffee. The stories of missing drivers, of vehicles found abandoned, the eerie disappearances where it felt like the road itself had swallowed them whole. The more experienced drivers, the ones who had seen it all, would give you knowing looks when you mentioned Route 666. They'd tell you to stick to the other routes, to avoid this cursed place at all costs. They'd laugh it off, calling it just a superstition. But I could see in their eyes that they knew better. They weren't laughing because they thought it was a joke. They were laughing to mask the fear that this road had burrowed into their bones. And now I was a part of it. I had crossed the threshold, driven too deep, and there was no way out. The road had marked me, claimed me. The rules, the strange rituals I had followed, do not stop. Do not acknowledge. Nod but don't engage. They weren't just guidelines. They were survival tactics, pieces of a twisted game that only the road understood. And every step I took, every mile I crossed, I could feel the game tightening around me. The rules were becoming more dangerous. The fear I had pushed to the back of my mind, the one I refused to acknowledge, was now clawing its way to the surface. The more I tried to follow the rules, the more they seemed to twist, to morph into something darker. I had been driving for hours now, my mind racing, the landscape around me blurring into an indistinct haze of trees and fog. It was impossible to tell where the road ended and the forest began. The darkness had swallowed everything, and the further I went, the more I felt like I was slipping into some other world. One where the rules I had once relied on no longer applied. The air in the cab had grown heavy, thick, and suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Something I couldn't see, but could feel with every nerve in my body. It wasn't just the weight of the silence around me, or the strange hum of the engine. No, this was something else. Something that had been building since I crossed into Route 666. It was a presence, a dark force that had been waiting for me. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man in black again. But there was nothing, just the endless stretch of road behind me. Yet that feeling remained, gnawing at the back of my skull, growing stronger with each passing minute. It was as though the road was pushing me forward, forcing me to keep moving deeper into its depths. And then the whispers came again. But this time, they weren't from the radio. They weren't from Ellie's voice or any illusion I had convinced myself was real. These whispers came from the trees themselves, rustling through the thick fog like ghosts in the wind. At first, they were faint, just barely audible. But then they grew louder, more distinct, until the words themselves seemed to wrap around me like a tightening noose. "You can't leave." My pulse quickened. I slammed my foot down on the gas, pushing the truck forward. But the road stretched ahead, longer than I remembered. I couldn't leave. The thought crashed into my mind like a wave. The road knew it. The road had already decided that I wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't just the fear of the man in black or the creatures that haunted the trees. It was something deeper, something rooted in the very fabric of this place. The road didn't just trap you physically, trapped you mentally, twisted your thoughts, manipulated your every step, making you believe that you were still in control. But you weren't. No one was. The truck shuddered as I hit a bump, and I glanced down at the dashboard. The temperature had dropped again. The cab chilled like a morgue. I recited my name, just as the rules dictated. But the cold didn't subside this time. It dug into my bones, making my teeth rattle. And then I saw it. In the distance, a figure stood at the side of the road, just like the man in black had before. Tall, motionless, his black suit blending into the shadows. But this time, there was something different about him. His silhouette wasn't solid, it shimmered like smoke rising from a fire. It flickered and warped, constantly shifting between shapes. It wasn't just the man in black. It was something more. I did what the rules told me. I didn't stop. I nodded once in his direction, my heart pounding in my chest. But even as I did, I felt the pressure building inside the cab, as if the very air had thickened around me. I pushed the gas pedal harder, but the figure didn't disappear. It was still there, flickering and shifting, its presence weighing down on me like a storm cloud. And that's when I heard it, the sound of something heavy scraping against the truck. A low, grinding noise that sent a wave of panic through me. It wasn't the creature on the roof this time. This was different. This was something inside the truck, inside the walls. The road was coming for me. I looked down at the floorboard, but there was nothing there. Just shadows stretching and shifting in the dim light. I could feel the truck's tires trembling beneath me as if it were fighting to stay on the road. The whispers in the trees grew louder, and with each passing second, the air inside the cab seemed to grow thicker, more suffocating. "You can't leave." The words repeated over and over until they were all I could hear. My mind raced, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to keep control. But the road was pushing back. It didn't want me to leave. I had heard the stories, but nothing could have prepared me for this. The road wasn't just a place. It was a living force, a force that had its own will, its own desires. And those who entered didn't leave, not truly. They became part of the road, part of its endless, twisting nightmare. As I approached mile marker 41, I realized the truth: the road had claimed me, and I would never escape. The miles began to blur together, a dizzying haze of headlights, fog, and darkened trees. The road, the trees, the sky, everything was shifting, warping, and distorting as though I were trapped inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The landscape around me seemed to grow more unreal with every passing mile, like I was driving through a painting that was melting at the edges. The world wasn't solid anymore, it was fluid, unpredictable, and utterly alien. I tried to focus. I tried to keep my mind steady, but it was impossible. Every time I looked around, the world seemed to change in subtle, unnerving ways. And the more I drove, the more I felt myself slipping away from what I knew, from what felt real. The truck was no longer just a vehicle. It was a prison. And Route 666? It wasn't just a road, it was a place where the rules of reality didn't seem to apply. But the most terrifying thing? The thing that kept clawing at my sanity, dragging me deeper into madness? The rearview mirror. Every time I looked into it, I saw something different. It started as a flicker, a shadow that darted too quickly for my mind to process. A movement in the trees, a flash of black, something that vanished as soon as I tried to focus. At first, I thought it was just the fog playing tricks on me. But then it happened again. And again. A figure. Always in the distance, always keeping pace with me, no matter how fast I drove. I'd glance back at the mirror and it would be there, lingering, an indistinct form that never seemed to get closer, but it never fell behind either. It was as if the laws of time and space were being bent, as if the distance between us didn't matter. The figure was always just there, locked in some kind of eternal chase. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, waiting for something. And every time I looked back, my heart would race a little faster. The figure never changed its position. It was as if it was glued to the road, tethered to the same path I was on, and I couldn't outrun it. I glanced at the mirror again. This time, the image that greeted me wasn't just a shadow. No, this time it was him. The man in black. But something was wrong. So terribly wrong. His form was distorted like a mirage, flickering in and out of focus. He wasn't fully solid. It was as though he was made of smoke. His body twisting unnaturally, bending in ways no human body should. His arms were long and twisted, stretching too far, as if they could reach out and grab me from miles away. His posture was all wrong, contorted, broken, like watching a nightmare unfold in real time. I could feel my pulse hammering in my chest as I stared into the mirror. He wasn't just there. He was moving too slowly, deliberately. The way he shifted in the reflection was disturbing, almost like watching something that wasn't quite human. The more I stared, the more I felt my grip on reality slip, like I was being pulled into the reflection itself, as if the mirror was becoming a doorway to a place I didn't want to go. I slammed my foot down on the pedal, pushing the truck to its limit, desperate to escape whatever this thing was. My heart raced, my hands trembling on the wheel. But no matter how fast I drove, the figure didn't vanish. The mirror remained unchanged. The man in black stayed with me, never getting closer, but never leaving either. "Do not look at him," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. The rules echoed in my mind: do not acknowledge him. Do not engage. Nod in greeting, keep going. But how could I not? How could I ignore him when he was right there, so real, so present, in plain view? I couldn't look away. The fear coursing through me paralyzed me. The road stretched on endlessly ahead, but now it felt like it was shifting beneath my wheels, pulling me deeper into whatever nightmare I had entered. Was I still in the real world? Or had I slipped into some twisted version of reality, one where the rules I knew no longer applied and the things I feared had become flesh? Suddenly, a high-pitched, jarring sound split the air. It was like nails dragging down a chalkboard, that sharp, grating noise that burrowed into my skull. My whole body tensed. The truck wobbled beneath me, like the very road itself was trying to knock me off course. The vibration in the cab was enough to make my teeth rattle. A shockwave of panic that hit me in my chest. I felt my heart lurch in my chest. My instincts kicked in, and before I could stop myself, I jerked the wheel to the side, pulling over onto the shoulder. The brakes screamed as I fought to keep control, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The noise stopped just as suddenly as it had started. The oppressive quiet returned, but it was a heavy, suffocating silence, like the world was holding its breath. My breathing was ragged, my body soaked in sweat as I tried to calm myself. I looked in the rearview mirror again. This time, the man in black was no longer just a shape in the distance. He was right there in front of the truck. His figure was solid now, standing directly in my path. His eyes dark, empty voids, locked onto mine through the glass. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. Those eyes felt like they were pulling something out of me, like they could see through me, see every dark thought, every moment of weakness. I had broken the rule. I had looked. I had acknowledged him. The price for breaking it was staring me dead in the eyes. A chill washed over me, cold as ice, crawling under my skin, tightening around my throat. I could feel the presence of the road itself closing in on me, pressing me into the seat. The truck felt like it was getting smaller, like the walls were closing in. I wanted to drive. I wanted to escape, but I knew it was too late. The road had me, the man in black had me, and there was no turning back. Couldn't breathe. The air inside the truck had turned thick and stale, as if something unseen had sucked all the oxygen out of the cabin. My chest tightened, and every inhale felt like I was sucking in lead instead of air. My pulse thudded in my ears, louder than the hum of the truck's engine, and my hands were slick with cold sweat on the wheel. I couldn't focus. My thoughts were tangled, frantic. Should I speed off? Try to leave this hellish road behind? Or had I already crossed the point of no return, sealing my fate the moment I entered Route 666? The man in black stood motionless in my mirror, just as he had been for the past few miles. His presence didn't need movement. It didn't need action. Just the sheer weight of him, his dark, twisted form, was enough to paralyze me. It wasn't a physical paralysis, not in the traditional sense. It was something deeper. A mental suffocation that gripped my mind, blocking out all rational thought, leaving nothing but terror. I tried to calm myself. I tried to remember the rules. Do not acknowledge him. But it was too late. The man in black had already acknowledged me. The rules, their hollow comfort, didn't seem to matter anymore. They were just words written on yellowed paper, now faded and useless. I was here, in the heart of whatever nightmare this road had become, and the rules couldn't save me. I wasn't in control anymore. A sudden, violent jolt shook the truck, throwing me forward against the seatbelt, my heart racing into my throat. The truck shuddered as if something was forcing it off course. I reached down to grab the radio, desperate for some distraction, something to break the crushing silence that was closing in on me. But before my hand even touched it, the radio crackled to life. And then the laughter came. Clear. Bright. Ellie's laugh. It erupted from the speakers like a cruel, mocking ghost, echoing through the cab. A chill ran through my veins, and the breath I had been holding escaped me in a ragged gasp. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be. My daughter wasn't here. She was safe at home, miles and miles away. So why, was her laugh filling the cab, cutting through the silence, clawing at my sanity? I slammed my hand onto the radio, hoping to silence the impossible sound. But it only grew louder, clearer, more desperate. Daddy, please help me. I'm scared. The voice, Ellie's voice, was so real, so raw, it made my blood run cold. I fought to stay composed, but my chest tightened, suffocating me with the weight of it. I couldn't look at the mirror. I couldn't look back at the empty seat behind me, where Ellie should be, where she wasn't. Do not look. Do not acknowledge. The rules echoed in my mind, but they felt meaningless now, like the sound of rain hitting a window. They weren't going to save me. The laugh faded into a sob, and my heart shattered with the sound. Daddy, help me. I tore my eyes away from the mirror. Couldn't look. But I had to. Something Some force beyond my comprehension tugged at my gaze, and there it was. A loud thud rattled the truck. The tires screamed as I lost control, the truck veering off the road. Panic surged through me. I yanked the wheel back, struggling to regain control, my hands shaking violently as I tried to steer the truck back onto the road. My heart hammered in my chest as the truck swerved dangerously, but I managed to correct it. The road ahead blurred. It seemed to narrow, closing in like a trap. Ahead of me, in the distance, I saw an eerie glow, a sickly light that sliced through the darkness like a knife. My stomach twisted as I sped toward it, my instincts screaming at me to turn around, to drive faster, to get away from whatever this place had become. But my feet were glued to the pedal. I wasn't driving anymore. The truck was pulling me forward, dragging me toward the light like a moth to a flame. A small white church stood at the side of the road, its steeple glowing faintly in the moonlight. There was no sign of life, no movement, no figures, no sound. But something about it felt wrong. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It was too clean, too pristine, like it didn't belong here, like it had been placed by something or someone with the intention of keeping me here. As I drew closer, I noticed the church doors were wide open, the light spilling out from within, illuminating the road ahead. But as I got even closer, I saw the figures standing in the doorway, shadows that danced unnaturally in the light, their movements too fluid, too synchronized. They weren't just people, they were something else. And then, the truck slowed on its own, as if the engine itself had decided to obey a force far greater than me. I could feel it. I was trapped. The rules screamed in my mind, "Do not stop." But my body refused to follow. The truck's speed was no longer in my hands. The figures outside began to raise their arms in unison, reaching out toward me, beckoning me to join them, to come inside, to return to the church. I couldn't move. The truck refused to accelerate. The glow from the church seemed to pull at me, as if the light itself were magnetic, drawing me toward it. I forced myself to look away. "Do not engage. Do not stop." The words felt like they came from a different life, a life where I still believed I had control. The voice on the radio crackled to life, and this time, I didn't even bother trying to turn it off. "Come back, driver." The voice was calm, soothing, familiar. Too familiar. It was the voice of an old pastor, calling me to join the congregation. The invitation was kind, but it held a suffocating weight, as if the very act of rejecting it would cost me everything. But I couldn't go. Couldn't. I had to escape. I had to break free. I turned my head, desperate to avoid the figures in the doorway. But I heard the footsteps growing louder, wet and heavy, like someone was running beside the truck. My stomach dropped. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to force myself to look ahead, but the sound of footsteps grew louder. It was as if someone was closing in on me. No. The sound was deafening, the pounding of feet on wet ground. I saw movement in the fog, dark shapes emerging, figures walking toward me. Their faces were obscured, their bodies twisted, grotesque, broken. Their arms stretched unnaturally long, their legs too stiff, like marionettes with tangled strings. They moved in perfect unison, as if they were all a part of one grotesque machine, a thing that should never exist outside of a nightmare. I slammed my foot on the gas, the truck surging forward, but the figures didn't fade. They kept pace with me, moving in a way that was unnatural, like shadows dancing on the edge of reality, always just behind the truck, never leaving. The temperature dropped again. The chill so intense it felt like the marrow in my bones was freezing solid. I instinctively recited my name, the words falling from my lips like a prayer. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. The words echoed in my mind, but they felt weak, fragile. The cold didn't lessen. The figures didn't disappear. I couldn't escape. I was trapped in the grip of something far older, far more powerful than me. And the rules? They were nothing more than illusions, tricks to keep me moving. But the road had already decided my fate. There was no escape. There never had been. The glow ahead grew brighter as I sped toward it. A faint, sickly light cutting through the thick fog that clung to the road. It seemed to pull me in, urging me closer. I didn't want to go. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to leave whatever that light was behind me. But the truck seemed to obey forces I couldn't understand. A small, white church appeared on the side of the road, its steeple gleaming eerily in the pale moonlight. It looked out of place, almost too pristine for a place like Route 666. But there was something wrong about it, something that didn't belong. It felt out of sync with everything around it, like a single perfect note in a melody full of dissonance. The church stood still, a beacon in the darkness, but no signs of life flickered within its walls. The world around me seemed to hold its breath as though it too knew this place was a trap. As I got closer, I noticed the doors of the church were wide open, the dark interior spilling out into the road. Figures moved inside, their shapes shifting in the light that leaked from the church like a beacon. They were silhouettes at first, shadows that flickered and danced. But as I slowed, they became clearer. There were several of them standing in the doorway like sentinels, their movements unnervingly synchronized as if they were part of some collective, some great, shared intention. The rules were clear. Do not stop. But something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. The truck, which had always obeyed me, now seemed to slow on its own. My foot was still on the pedal, but the truck wasn't accelerating. It felt like the vehicle was no longer mine to control. It was as if the church itself was pulling at the wheels, forcing me to stop, trapping me in its grip. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tried to push the pedal down harder. But nothing happened. I couldn't make it go faster. The fog thickened and the shadows of the figures in the doorway grew more distinct. I tried to look away, to force my gaze forward, but it was too late. The church had already begun to draw me in, and I was powerless to stop it. The figures outside the church raised their arms in unison, as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Slowly, deliberately, they extended their arms toward me. Their fingers long and unnaturally thin, their faces twisted in unnatural grins. The motion was too perfect, too practiced. I could feel the invitation in their gestures, the silent command for me to come closer, to enter their domain. They were beckoning me, urging me to return to the church. I turned my head sharply to the side, trying to ignore them, to ignore the pull that was seeping through the truck, into my skin, into my bones. The rules were clear, right? Do not stop. But my body refused to listen. It was as though I had become a puppet on a string, and the church was the one pulling the cord. The truck didn't belong to me anymore. My body didn't belong to me anymore. Then the radio crackled to life, even though I had turned it off hours ago. The sound piercing the stillness like a ghost's whisper in the dark. Come back, driver. The voice was soft, calm, almost kindly. An old pastor's voice inviting me to come in to join the congregation. The voice wrapped around me like a comforting hand, but there was something suffocating in that kindness. Something twisted beneath the surface. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break free of whatever was binding me to this road, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if the voice itself had become a leash, pulling me in, tightening with every word. I tried to force myself to look ahead, to focus on the road in front of me, but it was hard to ignore the creeping feeling that the entire world was closing in. The sound of footsteps began to grow louder, wet, heavy footsteps like someone was running beside the truck. The pounding feet were rhythmic, growing closer with every passing second, the sound like 1,000 shoes slapping against wet pavement, echoing in the fog. No. No, no, no. I thought, my mind screaming for me to keep control. But my hands gripped the steering wheel with all my strength, as though I could hold onto reality by sheer force. The sound kept growing, until it was so close it felt like it was on top of me. Every inch of my body screamed for me to escape, but I couldn't move. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw them. figures emerging from the fog, walking toward me with disturbing uniformity. Their movements weren't natural. They didn't walk like human beings. Their limbs were too stiff, too controlled. It was as if they were being puppeteered, their bodies jerking in unnatural motions, perfectly in sync with one another. Their faces were obscured, hidden behind shadows and broken, contorted expressions. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't real. They couldn't be. But they were. They were real enough to be here, real enough to walk alongside my truck, keeping pace with me. I slammed my foot on the gas, the truck lurching forward, the engine screaming in protest, but the figures didn't fade. They kept walking beside me, their shadowy forms never breaking their unnatural pace. They didn't move, they shifted, always staying at the edges of my vision, never leaving my side. The temperature dropped again. The chill wasn't just cold, it was paralyzing. My teeth began to chatter and I felt ice crawl up my spine. My body was shaking uncontrollably, but my mouth moved on its own. The rules had failed me, but instinct, pure animal instinct, took over. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. The words came out ragged, trembling, but they felt like the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. As if by reciting my name I could hold onto something that was still mine. But it wasn't enough. The figures didn't stop. The voices didn't stop. The road didn't stop. I wasn't driving anymore. I was being dragged deeper into the fog, deeper into whatever force was controlling this twisted stretch of road. The church loomed ahead, its doors still open wide, its invitation still hanging in the air, waiting for me to walk in. The figures outside still raised their arms in that eerie, perfect synchronization, urging me closer, pulling me in. I knew then I was trapped. There was no escape. The road ahead stretched on, but everything blurred together. My vision was like a painting smudged by rain, the lines of the trees and the road merging into one indistinguishable smear. I couldn't focus. My body moved on autopilot. I felt detached from myself, like I wasn't even driving anymore, just existing in the void between consciousness and madness. I could barely grasp what was happening, the world spinning too fast, too unreal. The only thing that mattered, the only thing I could control, was forcing the truck forward as if that movement could carry me out of the nightmare. The church loomed closer in the rearview mirror. I couldn't look at it, but I could feel it. Its open doors, the light spilling out into the darkness like a cruel invitation, beckoned me closer. The figures outside had disappeared, but I could still hear them in my mind, still feel the grip of their outstretched arms pulling me in. I had been warned. I had been told not to stop, not to even acknowledge the presence of that place. But it was too late. The road had me. It had claimed me. And then, just as suddenly as everything had begun, it stopped. The truck jerked forward, the tires skimming the asphalt before the engine sputtered to silence. My hands still gripped the wheel, but I didn't know why. The fog that had surrounded me for miles lifted, dissipating like smoke in the wind. The air felt different now, less oppressive, less heavy, but the sense of dread never fully left. I glanced around, my mind sluggish as it tried to process what was happening. The road was now wide and clear. No more fog, no more figures. The eerie calm was almost worse. I could feel it, that weight pressing down on me. The sense that I was being watched, being measured by something unseen. I turned off the engine. The truck came to a stop, but the silence was deafening. The radio crackled for a moment before cutting off entirely. The eerie voice that had haunted me for miles was gone. But then, ahead of me, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. A new mile marker appeared. Mile marker 117. I had heard the whispers, the warnings. I had heard the stories told in hushed tones at truck stops, passed from one driver to the next. If you see mile marker 117, do not acknowledge it. Do not speak of it. Just keep driving. But there it was, right in front of me. Mile marker 117, a number that should not exist. I had broken every rule. I had ignored the warnings. I had looked. I had stopped. I had acknowledged the things that lived on this road. And now it was too late. The headlights of the truck flickered once, casting a fleeting shadow across the road. My phone buzzed in my pocket, its vibration a sudden and alarming jolt. I reached for it, my hands shaking as I pulled it out. The screen was illuminated with a message from an unknown number. It read, "I acknowledge only the path before me." I stared at it, unable to look away. The words burned into my mind, their meaning clear yet unfathomable. I had already passed the point of no return. There was no escaping it now. It was too late. I had followed the rules. I had recited them in my head over and over, a mantra to keep me grounded. Do not acknowledge him. Do not stop for anyone. If you hear the voice, you must drive faster. But nothing had worked. The road had claimed me just as it had claimed so many before me. And now I was one of them. I had become part of the road, part of its unholy binding. I could feel it in my bones now, the deep connection to the highway, the pull that kept me tied to it. It was as if the road had woven itself into my very being, a part of my soul, a part of my mind that could never be severed. I can't leave. Not anymore. Now I walk the road every night just as the ones before me did. I don't stop. I don't speak. I can't. If you ever see me walking along the side of the road in the distance wearing a Wilson Freight uniform, don't stop. Don't look. Don't speak to me. I'm no longer the man I was. I am part of the road, part of its eternal cycle. I am where I belong. The authorities found my truck abandoned at mile marker 88, the engine still running, the doors wide open. My logbook was untouched, the pages still pristine, the records clean and unbroken. But there was no sign of me. No trace of where I had gone or why I had disappeared. But I'm still here. I walk this road every night, a ghost tied to its endless course. I no longer fear the road. I no longer question the rules. I enforce them now just as the road demands. If you're driving down Route 666 and you see me in the distance, if you see a trucker in a Wilson Freight uniform walking alongside the man in black, do not stop. Do not look. Because if you do, the road will take you too. As you drive along the darkened roads, remember the name Route 666. But more importantly, remember the rules. Don't stop. Don't acknowledge the man in black. And if you ever see mile marker 117, don't even look. Because once you do, it's already too late. Some roads don't just take you from one place to another. Some roads, like Route 666, claim your soul. They feed on your fears, your regrets, and twist you into something unrecognizable. And if you're unlucky enough to be drawn in, there's no coming back. Next time you're driving in the dead of night and see that ominous sign ahead, think twice. Because once the road has you, you'll never leave. Stay safe out there, but don't say I didn't warn you.